ายให้บอกNamo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gaudavani Prachadine Devashishra Shunnavari Paschatya Deshatarine Jaya Jaya Gora Jane Ratika Shobha Shiva Jaya Jaya Gora Jane Ratika Shobha Jana Visata Vane Jagamana Lobha Jake Nita Chan Bame Gadadara Nikate Adita Srini Vasa Jatradara Bulse Ache Horata Nana Simmasane Arati Kadena Brahma Adi Devagani Hari Gauri Chamara Dulaya Navasu Goshadigaya Shankar Baje Ganta Baje Baje Gadatala Marura Mridanga Baje Paramarasala Shankare Gandharaje Madhur Madhur Madhuraje Shankaraje Gandharaje Madhur Madhur Madhuraje Shankaraje Gandharaje Madhur Madhur Madhuraje Shankaraje Gandharaje Madhur Madhur Madhuraje Nitagara Haribo 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 Nitagara Haribo Nitagara Haribo 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 Nitagara Haribo Gate Chandra Jini Vadana Ujvara Hiva Gara Deshi Panamala Kore Jalamala Shiva Shukanara Preme Gadagada Shiva Shukanara Preme Gadagada Vakati Vinoda Deke Gaurada Sampada Vakati Vinoda Deke Gaurada Sampada Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Jai Krishna 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 Jai Krishna Krishna Jai Jagannatha Jagannatha Baladeva Subhadra Jaya Gauranga Gauranga Gauranga
Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajakaacharya Ashtotra Shata Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Abhay Charanaravind Bhakti Vedanta Swami Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Nitya Lila Pravishnu Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajakaacharya Ashtotra Shata Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की नमाचार्य श्रील हरिदास ठाकुर की श्री रूप सनातन भट्ट रघुनाथ श्री जीव गोपाल भट्टदास रघुनाथ षट गोस्वामी की प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधार श्रीवासदि गौर भक्त वृंद की श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोप गोपीनाथ श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड श्री गिरि गोवर्धन की श्री वृंदावन मथुरा धाम की श्री मायापुर नवद्वीप धाम की पुरुषोत्तम क्षेत्र श्री जगन्नाथपुरी धाम की द मोस्ट मर्सीफुल लॉर्डशिप श्री श्री किशोर किशोरी की परम करुणा श्री श्री गौर निताय की श्री श्री जगन्नाथ बलदेव सुभद्र महारानी की गंगामाई यमुनामाई की भक्ति देवी तुलसी महारानी की शिल प्रभुपाद ट्रांसेंडेंटल बुक डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन की युग धर्म हरिनाम संकीर्तन यज्ञ की श्री हरे कृष्ण महामंत्र की समावेत भक्त वृंद की निताय गौर प्रेमानंदे हरि हरि all glories to the assembled devotees Hare Krishna all glories to the assembled devotees Hare Krishna all glories to the assembled devotees Hare Krishna all glories to Shri Shri Guru and Gauranga all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Namaste Narasimhaya दया ददाईने हिरण्याकशिपूर्वक्षः शिलतङ्कानकालहये ईतो न सिंह परतो न सिंह ततो यतो यामि ततो न सिंह बाहे नरसिंह हृदये नरसिंह असिंगमादिं शरणं प्रपदे नरसिंहमादिं शरणं प्रपदे तव करकमलवरे नकम् अद्भुत दलिता हिरण्यकशिपु तनभृङ्गा वृषभवृता नरहरिरूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय केशवदेता नरहरिरूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे नरसिंहरे जय नरसिंहरे नरसिंहरे जय नरसिंहरे जय नरहरे जय नरहरे जय नरहरे जय नरहरे जय जय प्रभुपाद 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 जय प्रभुपाद निताय गौरा हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल भक्ति विघ्न विनाशक शीघ्रे भगवान की जय। भक्तराज प्रहलाद महाराज की जय। Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Nitai Gaura Premanande. Hari Hari Bol.
Please repeat after me. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Krishna Krishna. Hare Hare. Hare Rama. Hare Rama. Rama Rama. Hare Hare. On behalf of our founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada and ISKCON Chicago, I would like to welcome each and every one of you for our Sunday Feast program. Is there anybody here for the very first time? Please come up, we have a small gift for you. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We would like to see you here more often, at least on Sunday's evening. Calendar, on Saturday, we will be observing Ekadashi. Breaking the fast will be on Sunday morning between 5:22 to 10:19. Today's class will be given by His Grace Jai Jagannath Prabhu. Let's welcome him with a very loud Hari Bol. Hari Bol! Please make an aisle here for those who want to come up for darshan to the altar. Make sure that your cell phones are switched off, and if your children are here with you, please make sure that they don't disturb the class. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Okay. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Janavalama Girivaradhari Janavalabha Girivaradari Jasodha Nandana Raja Janaranjana Jasodha Nandana Raja Janaranjana Jamana Tira Manachari Jamana Tira Manachari Jaya Raja Manava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Manava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopinda Navalabha Girivaradari Jaya Gopinda Navalabha Girivaradari Jasodhanandana Rajajanaranjana Jasodhanandana Rajajanaranjana Nava Kunja Bihari Jaya Raja Manava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna Hare Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Krishna Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Krishna Hare Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Hare, Rama Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Nam Sankirtan ki jai. Okay. Om Ajnanantimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupakadamayam Dadati Swabhadantikam Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyareva Cha Pati Nam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. O Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. O Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna. Welcome to the Sunday feast. Today we'll be speaking from Bhagavad Gita. I wasn't exactly sure which verse to cover, but I'm thinking of covering the end of chapter 2. Krishna is speaking about the qualities of a self-realized person. The idea is that the beginning teaching in the Bhagavad Gita is that the soul is different from the body. Although that's contrary to what's obvious, it's somewhat counterintuitive because it looks like we are these material bodies. That's what's obvious. In fact, the perception of all the literatures that deal with yoga is the actual truth is exactly opposite what it appears to be. Krishna presents this idea in the Bhagavad Gita in chapter 15, where he describes the world as we know it as an upside-down banyan tree. So the idea of, anyone here has ever seen an upside-down banyan tree, or an upside-down tree for that matter? Anyone has seen an upside-down tree? You've never seen an upside-down tree? Where you have seen an upside-down tree? Nowhere you've seen. You see upside down tree anywhere? Where do you see upside down tree? Huh? By the ponds. By a body of water, you will see the reflection of a tree, and that reflection is upside down. You understand? So you can go check out, go to the lake sometime, and you can see one tree by the lake. So the tree will be upside down when you see it in the water, isn't it? The tree will be upside down. So when Krishna is describing this material world, he describes it as an upside-down tree, an upside-down banyan tree. I'm not going to go into the various details of that discussion there. But the idea is that the actual reality, the actual tree, is exactly opposite of what it appeared, the upside down tree, isn't it? The two are different, right? One tree is standing straight, other tree is down. So the idea here is that the reality as we know it, according to Krishna, is upside down. So it is interesting that the actual truth of what things are is exactly what opposite of what we think it to be, which is oftentimes counterintuitive. So anyway, the idea is that it is obvious to us that we are these various bodies. That's what's obvious. It's obvious to us the emotions that we experience in our mind are real things. These are real emotions. That's a very real thing. And Krishna says, no, it's actually opposite of the truth. You have nothing to do with this body, nor do you have anything to do with those emotional experiences, which we call ourselves. So if we're not these bodies and we're not these emotions, then it becomes hard to understand what we are exactly. You become a loss for words. If I'm not my feelings, if I'm not this body, then what am I? That would normally be a very good question, but most of the time we're so preoccupied with our life that we don't have time for this level of inquiry, isn't it? None of us normally think in this sort of way. So Krishna, because Arjuna has this sort of inquiry, so Krishna begins to break down to him the fundamental truths of reality. The idea here is that spiritual life basically begins when there's serious inquiry about the real situation of life, the existential questions. Why am I here? Why do I exist? What is the purpose of life? And as long as one is preoccupied with the work according to a certain way of thinking of yourself, then you have no time for these questions and you don't get spiritual answers, right? In other words, if a person isn't inquisitive, then spiritual life can never be relevant to him. Oftentimes we come to a religious place like a church or a temple, and we gather for various discussions like we're doing now, and oftentimes we find that the discussions are not relevant. We feel in this way, isn't it? How many of you feel in this way? Like 90% of the time or 100% of the time, that the discussions aren't relevant. Who is here feels this way? Only me? Only me. I live in the temple. Who here is feeling that many times they're not able to see the relevancy of the spiritual discussions that may take place in a spiritual community like our own and so on? 2, 3 people, and they all live in the temple. Okay, another. Okay, another. So we have this experience. Okay, I know we're sitting in front of God and everything, but He's not going to mind. Everyone be honest. How many of you find that the discussions are extremely relevant? How many of you find that the discussions tend to be, you tend to find that they're not relevant? Be honest, with a show of hands. How many? Well, I was going to say most of the time, but anyway, let's be fair. Sometimes you find that the discussions are not relevant. All right, okay, you have this feeling. Now, there's an actual reason for that. The reason is it depends. It has nothing to do, or let's say, it is not exclusively the responsibility of the speaker to make the discussion relevant, as oftentimes we want to pin that pressure on them. So if a class is what we may call a bad class or a bad discussion, it was all the speaker's fault, right? And that makes us feel good. It kind of puts aside the fact that we may be dull-headed or there may be some lack of interest on our side. But actually, you find that things are relevant, that certain things are always relevant. It just depends on to whom they're relevant. So I remember one time I was actually giving a discussion on Bhagavad Gita. How is the Bhagavad Gita relevant to the modern age? I was actually giving a talk at a home program once. And I said, I think we're asking the wrong question. It's not if the Bhagavad Gita is relevant, but the real question is to whom is the Bhagavad Gita relevant, right? Does it make sense? To whom is the Bhagavad Gita actually relevant? It's just like how many of you have gone into let's say the CVS or the Walgreens, and you've noticed the elaborate headache aisle. You know, the medicines, perhaps if you see the headache aisle, you might get a headache looking at it. So many medicines are there. But so how many of you walk into the CVS or the Walgreens or the Dominick store, and the headache aisle just really sticks out for you? How many of you have this experience that the headache aisle is really, okay, one person. Now, why does the headache aisle really stick out for you? So that's interesting for you, the fact that there are so many brands? Same thing? Okay, what's your answer? Because if you don't have a headache, you don't notice it. So you're saying that you don't notice the headache.
I'm saying it's like there's so much that's irrelevant because you don't need all of that. To you, it's irrelevant because you don't need it.
Okay, okay, first of all, who here has the experience of walking into a headache aisle and being really attracted to the headache aisle? No one here? Yeah. We're usually attracted to the apples and the candies of your kids and other sorts of stuff. When you have the experience of being attracted to the headache aisle, when you have a headache, isn't it? When you have a headache, all of a sudden the headache aisle seems so meaningful and so important, and you start thanking the Supreme Lord, the personality of Godhead. Thank you for a headache. Thank you for Excedrin. You know, what would I do without Excedrin? And you may come to the altar and thank the Lord for Excedrin and so on, aspirin. So when you have a headache, then the headache aisle is meaningful for you. It's very attractive to you. Otherwise, you don't even notice it, right? Does it make sense? So similarly, when is the Bhagavad Gita relevant? It's not the question of is this spiritual knowledge relevant, but the question is to whom is it relevant and when is it relevant? So that to whom it's relevant are for persons who are seriously inquiring about the existential questions of life. Who am I? What is the purpose of life? The sort of questions that if you think about them too much outside of a transcendental context, you tend to go crazy. In fact, you find that many existential philosophers and so on, existentialists, many of them ended up committing suicide and so on. Too much about this. What is the purpose of life? And by thinking hard, they ended up committing suicide or ended up in an insane asylum. So it is at this time when those serious types of questions are being asked that the Bhagavad Gita is. Otherwise, we're generally, our minds are trapped by the world of sense objects. And therefore, we find the discussion of the Bhagavad Gita irrelevant. Even when we come to a spiritual discourse, we find that we're not able to resonate with it because our mind is too preoccupied with life as it appears to be. Our minds are not actually preoccupied with life as it is, because that's what we're trying to figure out. But it's preoccupied with life as it appears to be. In other words, this world surrounding us appears very real. And there's a natural relationship that our mind shares with the apparent reality. The relationship is one of contemplation and desire. I'll explain that quickly what that means. Our mind, what are our minds always thinking about? Our minds are always thinking, isn't it? There's always some permutation going on in the mind. Even now, as I'm speaking, isn't it? Many persons' minds are not here. Like how many people are actually here in body, soul, and mind? Jesus said you should love God with all your body. Okay, check. All your mind, question mark. We come to the various religious programs and we may be there in body, but our mind is somewhere else. Our mind is preoccupied with something. And therefore, although we're sitting in a discussion like we're sitting now, where we don't get anything out of the class, this is another reason. It's not relevant. One reason it's not relevant is because we're not inquisitive about it. Another reason is that our mind is preoccupied. All class, it's amazing, isn't it? Have you ever had the experience of sitting in a 40-minute discussion and haven't heard anything? I mean, it's quite remarkable, actually, you know? You sit there for 40 minutes and you realize, oh my God, I didn't hear anything. And then sometimes if it happens to be a friend that was speaking the class or something, he will ask you, how was the class? And then you're like, oh my God, if I tell him the truth, he's going to be really mad. So then you say, well, oh, the class was fantastic. And then he says, well, what was it about? And you say, Krishna. You know, because you know that covers all bases because Krishna is everything, right? So it was about Krishna. Well, what particular point were you finding very interesting? And then you realize, actually, my mind was completely preoccupied to find anything of interest in the discussion itself. So this is one problem, that we don't find anything relevant in our practices and our discussions. Is one reason is a lack of inquisitiveness. So inquisitiveness gives context to how these scriptures can be meaningful for you. So if there's lack of inquisitiveness, it's not that they're not meaningful, they're just not meaningful to you. Right, so that's one problem. And then the other problem is the preoccupation of the mind. Now, how many of you here can honestly say that you're not 100% here in body, mind, and soul? You know, how many of us can say that? We're not here in body, mind, and soul. Because that's a very deep platform. Jesus speaks about it as if it's like matter of fact, you know. Offer your body, mind, and soul. It's like, hold on, wait a minute, how do I do that? And so the problem number 2 I'm presenting here is that the preoccupation of the mind is such because there's a natural relationship that the material mind shares with the material world of objects. We live in a material world of sense objects. There's two things. There are the senses and there are the sense objects. You've heard this language a lot, I'm sure, but you may not be aware of what it means all the time. How many senses do we have? We have, generally say, 5 senses, right? What are the senses? Do you know? What are the senses? No? Okay, we're learning something. What are the senses? 5 senses? See? Confusion about what the senses and sense objects are. That's why this exercise is always good. I know many people don't understand it, actually. Sense means the eyes. These are called the knowledge-acquiring senses. The eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, and skin. We'll say skin. These are called the 5 senses. And these 5 senses try to have a relationship with their sense objects. The object of the sense. That means the object which will give pleasure to that sense. The object which gives pleasure to the sense is called the sense object. Understand? Understand? The object which gives pleasure to the sense is called the sense object. Huh? Sense object, yes. So then the sense object for the ear is what? Sound, isn't it? You always want to hear some beautiful sound, isn't it? What is that beautiful sound? You are so wonderful. Yes, yes. More. What else you got? And then you don't want to hear other sounds like you've done some very nice project and someone has a feedback to offer. You don't want to hear, right? So that ear is attached to hearing beautiful sounds, right? And then the eyes want to see some forms. The eyes is attached to beautiful forms, isn't it? So in the material world today, the form of a half-naked woman is considered quintessential or topmost beautiful form. So practically speaking, our devotees, brahmacharis, once, this is an aside, but they went to the hardware store just a couple of blocks down, and they wanted to buy some paint for the temple. Sorry, it's funny to me thinking about it. They wanted to buy some paint for the temple, and there was one set of paint that had nothing on it but the name of the color. And there was another paint that had the name of the color and it had a half-naked woman on it. And it cost more. So then the devotees asked the how do you say, employee? Yeah, the persons who will help out, what do you call them? Clerks, the clerks. Oh, what is the difference between this paint and that paint? He said nothing. There is no difference. This one had half-naked woman on it, so it cost $20 more. So in this way, the eyes are attached to seeing some beautiful form. Of course, it may not be a woman, it may be cake. Cake is very beautiful, isn't it? Cookies, huh? Very nice, isn't it? Yes, you like cake. So in this way, the eyes are attached to seeing some beautiful forms. Then, what is the nose? Some nice scent is there. We're attached to some nice scent, isn't it? Very attached to it. And then for the tongue, taste, isn't it? And then for the skin, touch. You want to touch something palatable. So in this way, the senses have a relationship with the sense objects. Now the mind shares a natural relationship. I'm trying to describe why our minds are preoccupied with the sense objects, or preoccupied, and therefore we don't find anything meaningful in Bhagavad Gita. So this is my second point. The reason is that the mind also shares a relationship with the sense objects. The senses, of course, share a direct sort of relationship, and the mind shares an inseparable relationship with the sense objects also. What is that relationship that the mind shares with the sense objects? That relationship is one of contemplation, right? We're always contemplating sense objects. In other words, the sense objects steal away our minds, isn't it? The sense objects steal away our minds in the form of contemplation about them. So this is described, the mind enters into the sense objects in the form of contemplation. And the sense objects enter in the mind in the form of desires, isn't it? So you think about the world of sense objects, and then those sense objects come back into the mind as desires, isn't it? So give a simple example. You're trying to offer, this happens many times to us in the temple, you want to offer nice prayer to the deities. But as you're offering prayer, then pizza downstairs is being made, and that scent travels up the staircase, through the door, and right in front of the deities, right underneath your nose. Now what happens to your mind? Now, if you don't like pizza, nothing happens actually, right? But who doesn't like pizza, right? That's like a universal preparation. Indians like it, Westerners, these people, everyone likes pizza, right? So you're sitting there, you're trying to be really dedicated, you're really very devotedly offering prayer to the Supreme Lord, but then all of a sudden, the smell comes in your nose, the sense object smell of pizza enters into the nose, and what happens to the mind? The sense object is going back downstairs, and the mind, isn't it? Although you're offering, so now although you're standing in front of the deities, your mind is not anymore engaged in worship of the Lord, but is rather engaged in worship of the pizza. By meditation on the pizza, it's a form of worship, a form of yoga, right? The word yoga, of course, we know the word yoga means to establish a connection, but the word yoga also just means to contemplate deeply. In fact, Krishna uses the word yoga in chapter 6 to refer to samadhi, like complete absorption. So you're sitting there offering prayers in front of the deities, and then the smell of pizza enters your nostrils, and all of a sudden you enter into a state of yoga with the pizza, right? A complete union. So much so that the mind follows the scent. First, the smell goes back downstairs. The mind follows, and then what happens to the body? Jai. And then you also, you also go downstairs. So in this way, this is a natural relationship of the mind and the world of sense objects. The sense objects are literally stealing the mind away or trapping the mind and in contemplation on that which is only apparent and not real. So this is actually a very formidable problem. It's a very formidable problem because we exist in a world of sense objects. Everywhere you go, there's some sound, there's some smells, there's some forms, etc. And so when you exist in a world of sense objects, and the mind shares this natural relationship with the sense objects, how can one even hope to be free from such preoccupation? And as I'm mentioning, why do we feel that the Bhagavad Gita isn't relevant for us? Why do we find that our movement is only in relationship to the sense objects, oftentimes in terms of our inner movement, and not in relationship to the Supreme? And it's because our movement is actually completely arrested by the world of sense objects. It's quite amazing, actually, that oftentimes I've heard this world is described as a prison house. The word Durga, the word literally means a fortress. It's compared to a prison house which you can't escape. But the reason you can't escape it is interesting because it's a prison house without bars. This description comes up somewhere. I've heard it described like this, at least by our acharyas. And it's a prison house without bars. So it's very interesting that there can be a prison without bars. And what's even more amazing is that normally, even if a prison cell doesn't have bars, it has guards there to prevent you from escaping. Right? But this prison house doesn't even require guards also. This is an amazing prison house that it has no bars and it also doesn't require any guards. And why is that? Because there's sense objects. And those sense objects will do all the work that bars would normally do and guards would normally do. The guards and the bars keep a person from leaving the prison. But also, that is not required for this material world because the sense objects keep our minds trapped to the material, to the apparent reality. So it's amazing. For example, probably a very, and it's sitting there. Now, cocaine is completely inanimate. It can't do anything. And yet, a person finds that his whole body is arrested because of that cocaine. Although the cocaine is not doing anything, but it's as if it's speaking to him. Maybe I'll give a more relevant example. Cake. Something that we can all perhaps relate to. You like cake? You like cake, right? Everyone likes cake. I don't like cake so much. But if you put a little ice cream on it, then. So cake is there. Now suppose I make you very nice cake, your favorite cake also, and I put it right in front of you. And then I leave for a half hour and I say, don't eat this. Then what will happen to you? What will happen to you? If you have this cake, beautiful cake also you like, chocolate, vanilla, strawberry mixed together. And I go away for a half hour, I say, don't eat this. Then what will happen to you? Absorb. You become, this is an existential crisis. It's called existential crisis. Because you're not supposed to eat it because that is your duty. Duty is, you've been told not to eat the pizza or the cake, But what happens is the cake starts speaking to you. Hey, Haribo, you know I look good. you know you want to eat this. You know you want to eat like this. And so you become so, it's as if it's speaking to you. So that although you try to think of your responsibility, let's say your duty or dharma of not eating the cake, but your mind is completely arrested by a sense object. And therefore, you find that you're not able to move. Your movement is now arrested by something that's not even alive. That's quite interesting. It's one thing someone grabs you and holds you down and you can't move. But it's another thing that something is completely non-alive. It's not alive. It's asat, not even really truly there, and yet your mind is arrested by it. Another example of this would be YouTube, Facebook, or the internet in general. Now, how many find themselves arrested by 1, 2, 3, or all of the above? Yes? Everyone? Okay, some people serve in the temple all day, they don't have time. Although mine may be thinking. So you're liking the Facebook. Facebook is particularly extraordinary. I remember I initially got a Facebook. This is an aside, but it's relevant to what I'm saying. I originally got a Facebook account because I thought it would be a good way to interact with students that we were trying to inspire in their own spiritual lives. And then later on it became something else completely devoid of the actual purpose for which I got it. And Facebook is an extraordinary thing because you can go on scrolling for hours and somehow or other you don't get tired. Even this is not good for you also, but just looking, seeing what so-and-so is doing. Or when I was growing up, it was a Sega Genesis. Sega Genesis was a video game. I know I'm not that old. You must be familiar with the Sega Genesis. Sega Genesis was a type of video game, machine. PlayStation, Nintendo 64, like this. I remember our mother got us our first Sega Genesis. We were desiring it for years and years and years, and finally she got us our first Sega Genesis. It was a beautiful moment in life. Bringing the Sega Genesis home and placing it on the altar, the table. And then something extraordinary happened. My brother and I we would be on the Sega Genesis throughout the day and night. And literally we would go to school and our whole mind would be thinking Sonic the Hedgehog, because that was one of the main video games at the time. So we would be at school and our whole mind is absorbed in Sonic the Hedgehog, and when we would come home, we immediately throw our bags down and then just sit, and we would be playing for hours and hours and hours, and our mother would want to feed us and we didn't want to eat. The bathroom was considered a great disturbance. Our absorption, our yoga, we literally completely linked with Sonic the Hedgehog game and so on. So after a week, we came home, the Sega Genesis, and it was an existential crisis, you can understand. The breathing became palpitated. I need to sit down, as if you had asthma and so on. And our mother, that was the end of our Sega Genesis history, finished, nothing. Because it was too much of a preoccupation that other things which are actually important for our maintenance, like eating, was becoming neglected. And in fact, indeed, it's true that there are cases, especially in China, where people die because of their preoccupation with video games and so on. So in this way, anyway, so all of these points that I'm making is to bang on one point. The point is that why spiritual life isn't relevant to us. The first problem is, the first problem is a lack of inquisitiveness. And then that lack of inquisitiveness is actually explained by our preoccupation with the world of sense objects. So when Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, this is a very interesting point, because Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, he speaks in chapter 7, he speaks how it is very rare that anyone knows him. So it is very rare that anyone knows me. 3 times he says this in the Bhagavad Gita. And in the third place where he makes his point, he explains why it is very rare that anyone knows him. Mam tu vedana kashana. It's very rare that anyone knows. I know everyone, but me, no one knows. And then no one knows him. Itra dvesha samutena dvanda mohena bharata. He says because the living entity is preoccupied with these impressions of desire and hate going on in his mind. And therefore, in other words, it wouldn't be very difficult to know me in theory. But because of the preoccupation with sense objects, he is unable to know me. Because of the mind leads to the movement of the body. So our movement is impelled by this preoccupation of the world of sense objects. And this is, again, this is formidable obstacle because we live in a world of sense objects. How to overcome the world, how this problem, this dilemma. Dilemma one, what's the first dilemma? No inquisitiveness, isn't it? How many of you have deep existential questions about life throughout the day and night? Anyone here? Too much busy how to eat, isn't it? How to live, how to pay the bills. I'm glad I'm a brahmachari. I don't have to. There was a song growing up, Can You Pay My Bills? I don't remember who sings this, maybe Destiny's Child or something. And Can You Pay My Bills? And because if you could, then maybe I could be inquisitive about spiritual life. And oftentimes this is the thing that as brahmacharis, as monks living in the temple, we oftentimes go to persons and they will actually argue in this way. I have bills to pay, I have to eat, I have to either take care of my children. And so these are the things that people are preoccupied with, and in certain circumstances, rightfully so. And then after you live a life of this sort of, you just need a little bit of relief, isn't it? You want some relief. You don't want to hear a spiritual discussion about this deep philosophy. You're struggling all day, working, trying to survive, trying to pay bills, trying to take care of your children, make sure they're getting everything they require. And after that, you're ready for a deep discussion about Bhagavad Gita, isn't it? After all of that hardship, you're ready for like a really profound, deep, amazing discussion about Bhagavad Gita, isn't it? That's like the first thing you think of when you get home, isn't it? Huh? No, the first thing you think of is YouTube, a break. In other words, you want some release, so you look for some form of sense enjoyment. So first problem is a lack of inquisitiveness, and that is explained by our preoccupation with the world of sense objects. And this is a very formidable enemy. And therefore you may find that some of you may have a spiritual practice. I'm sure many of you do here at least do some chanting. For others who may be new, you may also find that you pray or you try to do some yoga, something that can kind of connects you in a deeper sense to a subjective reality beyond that. And she said, Srila Prabhupada, when I chant Hare Krishna, I see red lights. And Prabhupada said, don't worry, keep chanting, it will go away. And then, this is described in the Prabhupada Limamrita, and when Prabhupada said that, it says that the girl immediately became like sober, like she became kind of. Our particular practice in Gaudiya Vaishnavism, for those of you who may be new, is the chanting of the holy names of Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And when we first started chanting them, we felt something wonderful. We felt the connection with God, etc. But after some time, we find that it has become a dry ritual for many of us. And the reason is that we're not able to sense that connection anymore because of Krishna's transcendental nature, and also because we're not tuned in properly. It's something like, when I remember when we got maybe our first television. It was a very old television. Anyway, with these very old televisions, you had these antennas, and you had to like adjust the antenna just right to get the clear image. I don't know how many of you are familiar with. Some of you may have TVs like that now, but you had to get the just right, And sometimes if it was just not in the right spot, you had to just like tap it slightly, and then the TV will come clear. And if it was just a little bit out, you didn't get a clear frequency. You remember these types of televisions? So I remember growing up with it would be very frustrating because especially when Power Rangers was on. Power Rangers is one of our favorite TV shows as a child, and somehow the TV would always act up, and you was always trying to figure out where to put the antenna, how to sliding it back and forth like this, trying to figure out what spot on the TV would go. So the idea here I'm trying to express is that unless there was the right attunement, right frequency alignment, then you don't get that experience, even when you're trying to connect with God by whatever process that you accept for that connection. It needs to be just kind of proper, just so you can get that experience. And without that right alignment, you don't get that experience. And so what happens is, because of our minds, that mind is creating fuzziness in the frequency. Right? You understand my little analogy here? It is the mind that is creating all the fuzziness that is not allowing us to experience that connection with the Supreme, right? Through our chanting or through whatever other process that you may follow for gaining connection. So unless the mind is, let's say, calmed or transcended is another word that may be used, then you don't actually experience this connection with Krishna. In fact, you'll see several verses in the Bhagavatam speaking about the whole purpose of spiritual life. In fact, in one sense, this is not the positive attainment of spiritual life. If you can conceive of spiritual life in two broad divisions, one broad division is the positive attainment, and the other broad division is the removal of the negative. Right? We call it, in our process, we call it anarchana vritti, the process of removal of the negative. And then on the positive, then there's a positive attainment. Can you understand this? I'm not exactly expressing it in the best sort of way. So you'll find that the beginning aspects of spiritual practice is the removal of the negative, or in context of how I'm explaining it, trying to get the right frequency so that you can be steady in terms of your movement in the positive realm. And in other words, it is the mind that's creating all the fuzziness by which we are not able to gain any experience, either from our discussions in a spiritual talk like this one, or from our own personal practices at home on chanting japa, etc. We don't gain the connection because the mind is too fuzzy. And unless we're able to overcome that fuzziness of mind, then our spiritual life goes on like this, and we continue on the cycle of repeated birth and death. So we have a formidable task ahead of us in overcoming or transcending the mind, or getting the mind to the proper frequency in which it relates to Krishna. And I just kind of pointed out in other words, I've only kind of talked about the problem, time to go deeply into the solution of how to gain more from our chanting and so on. I kind of wanted to talk about the problem though, because I know on a personal level, and I think it will be true for many of you, that that life is so engaging that it is the case that we don't find that this Bhagavad Gita is relevant. Unfortunately for us, the information by which we can actually attune our minds properly to gain substantial experience happens to be in the Bhagavad Gita. So this is a very serious dilemma that we're having, actually. On the one hand, my mind is uncontrolled, or rather controlled by the world of sense objects, so I don't find the Gita interesting. I have no questions about the Gita. On the other hand, the information by which I will be able to overcome that happens to be in the Bhagavad Gita. So this is a big dilemma, isn't it? Problem, isn't it? Big problem. How many of you can recognize big problem from my explanation? Problem, isn't it? Big problem, huge. The secret to our success happens to be in something that I don't care about, unfortunately, due to my preoccupation. Therefore, as a final point, this is a soundbite for the positive attainment. If one is really interested in overcoming the influence of the mind's preoccupation with the world of sense objects, you require a lot of spiritual strength. Understand? Spiritual strength. That spiritual strength, of course, is not something that we have alone. It's something that we gain by connecting to something more powerful. It's something like this. If you stand in the sun, what happens to your body? It becomes hot, right? Not a trick question. If you stand in the sun, the body becomes hot, isn't it? The more you stand, the sunshine makes the body hot. So the Supreme Lord is like the sun. And the rays of the sun are the Bhagavatam, the scriptures, and the devotees who can explain them. This is actually described by Kaviraj Goswami. He compares Gaura-Nitai is situated to the far left of the altar for those of you who are new. Gaura-Nitai is compared to the sun and the moon that arise simultaneously on the bank of Gaudadesh, isn't it? That would be an extraordinary sight to see the sun and the moon rise simultaneously, isn't it? Such an event happened with the appearance of Gaura-Nitai. They're like the sun and the moon that arise simultaneously. And then their rays, the rays coming from that sun and the moon, does two things. The rays of the sun or moon does two things, understand? Two things the rays do. Number one, it removes darkness, understand? Number two, it allows you to see objects as they are, Understand? This is what happens when light comes in the room. When there's darkness, you cannot see anything. So that is what happens. This is what we say, Om Ajnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya. We're moving in this world. Our movement is not enlightened movement. It's inspired by ignorance, believe it or not. No one here was born enlightened, isn't it? So our movement is inspired by ignorance. So when the sun rays come, first thing that happens is darkness is removed, isn't it? Second thing that happens is you can see the objects as they are. Right? Two things happen. Understand? Two things. You understand? Two things happen. Darkness is removed. You can see objects as. So when Gaur Nitai appeared on the bank of Godadesh, the darkness of cheating religion was removed. The cheating religion God for some selfish reason that has nothing to do with God. This is called cheating religion. One time, I often mention this story to our brahmacharis. I was on my way to book distribution, and the devotee who was training me in Krishna consciousness at the time, he had a cart that had Lord Jagannath on it. So when we walked into front of he was a Christian, so-called. A real Christian is someone I think much different, but he was a so-called Christian. So he asked he said, "Who is this?" And so my friend said, he was very eccentric. He said, "That's Jagannath, the Supreme Lord," like that. And I was like, "Oh, brother, this." And so then he started kind of blaspheming. He said, "What has your God done for you? My God has given me a good wife. My God has given me a good house. My God has given me a good car, a good paying job. What has your God done for you?" And I say, "He took all those things away." so that I could focus on him. Because with all those distracting things, I can focus. So he took all those things away so I could focus on him. So first thing the light of Lord Chaitanya does is remove the darkness of cheating religion. That means approaching God for some ulterior purpose other than to please him. This is called cheating religion. Even you approach God, "Please remove my sickness. Please help my son pass his exams," and so on. I have those feelings, and we're not really trying to find fault with that. I'm just pointing out what the CC says. This is all cheating religion. To approach God other than some other purpose and to serve him is called the cheating religion. So much of that is going on. So by the mercy, he's like the sun, so the sunlight, it removes that darkness of cheating religion. In other words, the vibrations that are taught by those who are followers of Lord Chaitanya removes that darkness that says that we should approach God for other reasons other than to please him. Then, that's the darkness is gone. Now, what are the objects that sun shows to us, isn't it? The sun does two things, isn't it? First thing is rises. Not hearing. That's my point, not hearing. It removes the darkness. Second thing, it shows objects as they are. So what objects did Mahaprabhu's sun reveal? What two objects did it reveal? It revealed two types of objects. Two types of objects. Understand? You listening? Two types of objects it revealed. Object number one, Shastra, particularly the Bhagavatam. Object number two, the devotee to explain that. Those two objects he revealed. Understand? So I went through this whole explanation to explain one point. That one point is that if you keep yourself in the sun long enough, what happens? You get hot, isn't it? It's not a trick question. If you keep yourself in the sun long enough, the body becomes hot, isn't it? So the sun ray, what is the sun ray of Lord Chaitanya? That sun ray, Bhagavata, book Bhagavata, and person Bhagavata. So one needs to keep himself in that long enough to overcome this obstacle of preoccupation with the world of sense objects, understand? Unless you keep yourself associated with the Bhagavata book and the Bhagavata person long enough, your body will not become hot, isn't it? If you go inside the sun for 2 minutes, oh, it is too hot, immediately go back in the shade. That's what we do, isn't it? We sit for the class 5 minutes, we go. We find it intolerable. Oh, too much of heat is coming, isn't it? Some discussions you hear, oh, too much of heat. Immediately you want to leave. But you keep yourself in that heat long enough, then you become hot. In other words, by keeping yourself in the Sangha of person Bhagavata, book Bhagavata, the heat of that association purges the mind of the preoccupation with the world of sense objects. Otherwise, no hope. You're supposed to end on a sweet note. Otherwise, no hope. But there's all hope if one keeps himself in the heat. What is that heat? Say it, tell him. What is the heat? Shastras and the sadhus. You cheated. Sadhu and Shastra, you keep yourself long enough. So it may be difficult. Sometimes it is difficult because the heat coming from such persons may be hard to digest, hard to experience. Sometimes you read things in the Shastra, it comes out very heavy. Sometimes you're like, this is me. Because it's cutting away at all our attachments, we feel that it's me. But only by that association can we overcome this obstacle. Otherwise, it is practically a hopeless situation. Mind shares its natural relationship with the world of sense objects. Understand my point? So simple message is there. Simple message is there. You have to keep yourself in the Sangha of two things. What is that? Book Bhagavata, person Bhagavata. And then the heat of that association will purge the mind of its preoccupation with matter. And when the mind is purged of all that preoccupation, all the fuzziness is gone, you gain experience of your deity that you're worshiping. Otherwise, no experience available. Understand? No experience available. But if we are smart enough to take that heat, because it's good for us, understand? The word tapasya, the word tapa literally means heat. So tapa means heat. Tapasya is generally translated as austerity. Austerity means voluntarily accepting suffering for a higher cause. So you accept this heat. What is that heat? Book Bhagavata, person Bhagavata. That heat. It's a tapasya. Sometimes it is tapasya. Just like now, class is supposed to be over. I'm going on and on and on and on. It is an austerity. But you take that heat. This is a good heat for every one of us. Good heat. This is tapasya. Our class is supposed to be over 6:30. Jai not feeling inspired, going on and on and on and on and on and on and on. This is called tapasya. You take that heat. And by taking heat, then your mind will be purged of its preoccupation with matter. Just like now, discussion is going on, and because it's a bit engaging, now you're not thinking so much about other things, isn't it? At the very moment. Now your mind just jumped, but because it's a little bit fun, a little bit engaging, your preoccupation with the world of matter is a little bit retracted. So imagine if you do that constantly, what will be the benefit? Constantly you do that. Understand? This heat you have to accept. This is called tapo divyam putra kanyena sattvam. Austerity for devotional service, for achieving goal of life. Simple message I have given. It's always relevant, but only to one who is inquisitive. And one can develop his inquisitiveness if his preoccupation with matter is decreased. In order to do that, you have to keep yourself in the association of devotees, sadhus, and Shastra. Then the heat that comes from that purges the mind of its preoccupation with the world of matter. You can gain experience of your deity, and you become completely blissful. Completely blissful. Nothing lacking in you. Nothing lacking. You'll feel no lack whatsoever. This is my message. You like my message? It's very hard to apply though. Because we don't want to associate with sadhus or shastras. But this is our only prospect. When you see this book, or you see a devotee, you should understand my prospect in spiritual life lies there. If you don't see like that, then you have no spiritual life. If you see devotee, all you see is so many faults you see, or you look at Bhagavad Gita, oh, what is this Bhagavad Gita? It's so irrelevant. Finished. Understand? Spiritual life is finished. But when you look upon Bhagavad Gita, or you look at a sadhu, you should see my prospect in spiritual life lies there. Don't leave Bhagavad Gita as it is on your bookshelf. Bhagavad Gita as it is. See, this Bhagavad Gita looks good. You know why it looks good? Because it looks used. Otherwise, you go to some devotees' homes, and it looks brand new. You're like, wow, this is a brand new Gita? Oh, I got that 20 years ago. 20 years ago? Why does it look brand new? Because it's been there as it is on the bookshelf. This is what Bhagavad Gita is supposed to look like it's being used. A little bit wrinkly on the edges, pages are looking a little bit marked up. That is good. You're trying to understand. Because when you see the Bhagavad Gita, you see my spiritual life lies there. When you see sadhu, you see my prospect in spiritual life lies there. Otherwise, hopeless. I can't end on a positive note. I'm trying. So that's my message. I hope you laughed, so that's a positive note. Hare Krishna, thank you very much. You want to ask something? Because I know I've kept you. I know prasadam is, see, the sense objects, isn't it? Mind, immediately, running. Somehow or other, because of your great respect, you kept the body sitting. Although mind is say, come on. You're sitting only, so I thank you for that. We'll take one question is here. Just speak up loudly, I'll repeat.
So, thank you very much for that really wonderful class. You explained very nicely the relationship of the senses with the gross sense objects. Usually I find my mind is preoccupied with things like he said, she said, or he did, she did, and that relationship is not very clear for me to understand. I can understand the other relationship more clearly.
Well, the he said, she said is a sense object, isn't it? Because for the conditions, so the question is that more than being preoccupied with gross sort of sense objects, we're usually preoccupied with other people's faults, isn't it? He said this, she did that, that happened, they did this, they said that. That's what we find ourselves preoccupied with. Because we don't conceive of those persons as spiritual, we conceive of them as bodies. And so that a preoccupation with a sense object only, isn't it? Because when you think of a person, generally when we think of a person, what do we think of? Their bodies, isn't it? And then we think of how they have certain sort of mentality, which we don't appreciate, which is also part of their body. So it ends up as here, I'll explain it in this way. This is a unique way of thinking of this. This is a sense organ for us. For your own ear is a sense organ, isn't it? You consider your own ear a sense organ. But you consider my ear a sense object. Isn't it? For you, my ear is a sense object, and for you, your ear is a sense organ. And why is that differentiation there? It's due to the influence of false ego. False ego makes me see that I am this body, so this is my sense organ, and makes you look upon all others as sense objects. Isn't it? So it turns out that even when we're thinking about persons, he said this, they did that to me, and so on, it ends up just being a preoccupation with a sense object, not with the actual person who happens to be completely different from that body. And therefore you'll find that very elevated spiritualists, because they don't see people as their bodies, they don't even get offended when someone does something harmful to them with their bodies, right? For example, someone tries to even attack them with a knife. This happened in the case of Srila Prabhupada. One time Prabhupada, in the earlier days when he was trying to start the movement, someone attacked him with a knife. He was saved from that. Few days later, the kid came to take prasadam. I mean, that's pretty bold. Such was the situation. He was taking LSD, I think, or something like that. So when this kid came, Srila Prabhupada said, oh, see, he is making spiritual advancement. Immediately you wonder, because when the devotees saw him, when some of Prabhupada's disciples saw him, they asked him, should we throw him out? And Prabhupada said, no, let's see, he is making spiritual advancement. He is coming to take prasadam. Prabhupada saw it in a totally different way than we see. Because what the devotees saw was a sense, anyway, what they saw was a sense object attacking their Guru Dev. What Prabhupada was seeing was a spirit soul just being moved by matter. So he gave more importance to the spirit soul and not so much importance to how he was being moved by matter, right? Someone attacking you with their body means a soul who's being moved by material nature, by matter. But a very elevated spiritualist, one who's realized Krishna, one who's realized that he's not this body, and thus realized that others are not their body, he sees as a spirit soul being moved by matter. And he gives all importance to the spirit soul, and not so much importance to how he's moved by matter, either piously or impiously. So when someone does something to us, we give all importance to that action done in the material nature, and no importance to the actual spirit soul, because we don't see them as souls. We just see them as sense objects. And that way our preoccupation is only with a sense object, the so-called he and she that we're picturing in our mind when we think about them. It's not that we picture a spirit soul in our mind when we're thinking about them. We're picturing their bodies and so on. In this way, my point still stands. So there is only one solution to this problem, two aspects, but one solution, two aspects. What are those two aspects? Devotee and Shastra. My only hope. When you see devotee and you see the Shastra, one shall think my prospect in spiritual life lies there. I must take that association, otherwise I will be lost. No hope. Helpless, hopeless. I always say this in my morning classes. Two things. Helpless, hopeless. This is actually a very positive message. This is positive. You know how it is positive message? Because by realizing this, you can really take shelter in your actual prospect in spiritual life. I remember I met one kid at Northwestern University. This was probably about 5-6 years ago. And I was speaking to him about the material world, and it's temporary, it's full of misery, and we devotees in the beginning, we usually like those types of messages. And he looked at me and he said, "You're the most negative monk I ever met." And I had to admit, my false ego was a little touched by that, a little hurt. I said, actually, this is positive. And then I explained, it is as positive as if someone tells you that you're moving in the wrong direction. You're looking for a temple. The temple happens to be in the east, but you're driving the west with full confidence you are driving. 80 miles an hour driving. Finally, you see, the temple is not coming. Maybe it's a little bit further. Finally, you pull over to the gas station, and he tells you are driving in the wrong direction. Is it positive or negative? It's positive. It comes out sounding like negative. It was a positive statement, actually. Because by that realization, you can change the course of your action. So similarly, when we say that someone is helpless and hopeless, there is actually a positive message in that. The positivity in it is that I am helpless. We usually tend to have a Superman idea of ourselves. I'll do everything. I'm so good. I'm so smart. I'm so strong. But then you meet a sadhu who says, he looks at you, he says, "You are helpless and hopeless." And by hearing that message, and you take it to heart, you understand what he's saying. Then immediately you find your prospect and you find your shelter and sadhu and shastra, and you gain the real prize, the real purpose of spiritual life. But as long as we have a sense of our own proficiency, then we are helpless and hopeless. So we're giving up that mentality, we find our prospect in spiritual life, we overcome our obstacles. Thank you very much for tolerating me, even though the class went over a little bit longer. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
How about Reena Mataji? I thought Reena Mataji can sing. She went up probably. Yeah, 8 o'clock. Oh, I'm sorry, 7:50. 7:10, 7:15. So another 20 minutes.
प्रभु जी वो बैठ के इतना हिल रहा था आगे. Hey, get the kartal and play. प्रभु ओ इससे अच्छा लगता है मुझे. Thank you. वो थोड़ा सॉफ्ट है बजाने के लिए. थैंक यू थैंक यू. गिनियाने एटी बस.
विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमती भक्ति वेदांत स्वामिनीति नामिले. नमस्ते सरस्वती देवी गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पश्चात्यदेश तारिणी. हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा Krishna 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 Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna,
ओम ज्ञानतिमिरन्दस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे रामा राम राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, to beat. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Hare Krishna. Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Yes.
विष्णुपदाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय विठले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदांता स्वामिनिति नामिने नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदांता स्वामिनिति नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पश्चात्यादेशकारिणे सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पश्चात्यादेशकारिणे श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौरभक्त वृंद चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौरभक्त वृंद श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौरभक्त वृंद कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौरभक्त वृंद श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौरभक्त वृंद श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौरभक्त वृंद चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौरभक्त वृंद हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hari Bol. Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hari Bol. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Gauranga. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hari Bol, Hari Bol. Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Ram Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Ram Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Ramo, Ramo Ramo, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Ramo, Ramo Ramo, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Ramo. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Krishna Krishna Hridaya, Krishna Krishna Hridaya, Krishna Krishna Hridaya, Krishna Krishna Hridaya, Krishna Krishna Hridaya. Jaya Jagannath, Jaya Jagannath, Jaya Baladeva, Jaya Subhadra. Jaya Gauranitai, 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 Jaya Gauranitai. Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada.
Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Prabhupada.